Natalie, you've mentioned brain waves.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you explain what you mean by brain waves and what the different brain waves are that you can identify and pick up and mold?
Okay. So we all have bioelectricity, as you know. And what we're doing when we regulate and see brain waves, literally, is we use an EEG. So it's an electroencephalograph, and it picks up brain waves. So they're quite soft and subtle, but literally they oscillate from the center of our brain and deeper centers, and they come all the way up to the top of the neocortex and the cranium and skull. And so we put electrodes onto the skull, and then we can measure and read what the frequencies, the different frequencies. Exactly. So and like radio waves. So we're reading the different array of.
Isn't that funny? Our difference. I'm like a lightning storm. You're like no radio waves. Much calmer. I'm like, okay, that's better.
Were you here last night in the storm? Okay, so absolutely. So there's varying degrees of these, and so we start with delta. So delta is the slowest brainwave, and it's dominant when we're sleeping.
Okay.
And so it's very nice and calm. It's usually 0 to around 4 hertz. And that helps keep us asleep. And so obviously we don't want that around and present when we're riding.
Yes. 50 round. Okay.
So we have all of the brain waves all of the time in our brain. It's just the pattern, which is important. And of course the regulation, which is important for us. And then the next brain wave is called theta. And it's a wonderful brain wave. It's a little bit faster, around 4 to 8 hertz. And it helps us, it's our first wake stage brainwave, and it really helps us think about things in an imaginative, creative, we use it for big picture thinking also, but as you can imagine, if theta is very, very high, it's also not that useful if I'm coming into a 1 meter 60 fence quickly. So what we want to do is make sure that that's within range of the person's natural flow. So that's one of the things that we look at, and as I said, great for you when you're doing all of your imaginative and creative work. It's fantastic. So you're probably using theta, alpha, and a little bit of beta at the same time to get into that, which is fantastic. So then the next brainwave, which is a little bit faster, is called alpha. And alpha is fantastic. It's when it's in a good, calm flow or good, steady flow within its own range, it allows us to be engaged and focused, but relaxed and engaged and focused, which is really nice. When it gets too high, we become a little bit disengaged. And then, so that's also not so great.
And is that something you would find in like ADD people, for example?
Yep, theta and alpha generally. But what's important when we think about it from a riding perspective, if alpha is too high, so very often as I'm interested in something, alpha does peak. But if it goes up too high, I will become a little bit less, I'll become a little bit disassociated to what I'm doing. And then the next is beta. And beta is much faster. So we have several levels of beta, but this range beta that I'm talking about now gets us into a good level of focus. So it's really important for us to have this when we're riding. It's kind of when we get into the zone, we don't worry about anything else. We can be active, we can be engaged, but we're also not fretting. So it's not the high beta where we are having to really worry about things or really. We do use high beta for all of our problem solving, and we use it for many other things as well. But when we are in a sticky situation in riding, both the betas generally go up really high, really quickly. But it's how quickly they come back down and smooth oscillation happens that's important for us. So it's exactly like our horses when they get a fright, and then 2 minutes later they're standing there and you're thinking, no, why did this?
No, they controlled their beta well.
Yes. So
I'm so happy for them.
Could be, yes, it could be. So what we really want to think about is how do we, first of all, use these things to our benefit? And when I am concentrating and I am thinking about things, I also then get to know and get to understand my flexible range of where I've had enough actually of concentrating, where I've kind of hit a wall in terms of concentrating. And for all of us, I mean, there's a set amount of time on it, but you can train those things as well. So what's really important for children that are studying and varsity students and whatever, it's good for them to know and understand a little bit more of how it feels when their brain's getting tired. And also how it feels when they are just getting distracted. We're training rest and recovery. So we're not saying that you will never fall or you will never experience a bad round.
Just to bring the brainwaves back.
Exactly. It's how quickly you can recover and what tool you choose to use in that time. That's important for people.